Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestle Plug podcast. It's Monday, which means it's time for a bit of a manic session. Not manic depression, thank God, although I feel like I might have it if I continue to see pay-per-views like this. I am your host, Aeron Denny, and joining me to discuss Bad Blood 2004 is Steve Neal.
Yes, 2004. I recently tweeted out 2004 was a mental year in wrestling. This was just the fucking drizzling shit. Bad Blood 2004, famous for pretty much nothing. Let's tear into this bad boy from, I think it took place in Ohio, which is the most forgettable of all states, for the most forgettable of all pay-per-views.
Yeah, Columbus, Ohio, which Vince McMahon rather famously would call the middle of America, because he didn't want people to know that they're actually in Ohio, because it was apparently a badge of dishonor. Rather famously, they had a pay-per-view in Dayton, Ohio, if I remember rightly. I believe it was King of the 93. And yeah, they just announced this, welcome to the heartland of America, or something like that. It was just terrible. Absolutely terrible. Yeah, only 9,000 in attendance in a nationwide arena in Columbus, Ohio, June the 13th, 2004, with the tagline, he's back, what's yours? Fuck off.
What?
I know, right? It's terrible. Absolutely appalling. What is this? Some sort of... Oh, never mind. Batista defeated Maven on Sunday Night Heat.
Yep, that was a thing.
Oh dear. Remember Maven. What a thing that was. Yeah, opening up this horrendous show for the WWE World Tag Team Championships, La Resistance, who are now champions, that was news to me, defend their titles against Edge and the World Heavyweight Champion Chris Benoit. Redacted.
Yeah, he was so redacted in this era, they made him Benoit 2 belts. A bit like Becky 2 belts, but with more murder.
And more charisma. Yeah, I said it. Come at me, Becky stands.
Yeah, this was a match that happened. It wasn't very good, and there's 4 talented guys in this match as well. Like, both tag teams are good wrestlers, but it was just poor. And again, thrown together tag teams, being given the belt, using it as a prop to further kind of title storylines, just the drizzling shit. Again, this is what you're Canadian. Go up against these French Canadians. Where should we do it? Ohio. Nah, money. Fuck's sake.
Yeah, fans didn't give a shit. Did not give a shit. I have nothing here to report. Benoit is about to win. He's about to get the tap out. I think it's Rob Conway. He's in the crippler crossface for what seems like about 3.5 minutes before Kane comes ambling down to interfere and batter the faces. Which just is just... no. That's when we find out that apparently Benoit's going to defend his World Heavyweight Championship against Kane later, which I admittedly thought... Yeah, you know. At the time, I think I was quite fascinated by the idea of this, because it was such a different rivalry. And it was quite a nice idea on paper, sending Kane after him, but it wasn't executed well here.
Again, here's a problem. Here's a problem with this. We saw Kane jobbing out to Edge with one arm, like 2 months ago, and now Kane has come down to this tag match in which Edge is got 2 arms and is a competitor, and he goes after Benoit, and we're now supposed to see him as a genuine and realistic contender for the title, even though he's been jobbed out to Edge on pretty much the last pay-per-view, Raw pay-per-view. Fucking just makes no sense. Makes no sense. Double duty for Benoit.
Yeah, there's a plethora of talent on this card, but they're not used correctly. And that is really the biggest indication of this show. You know, Edge, he's in a tag match with La Resistance. Like, why? He's just come back. He's just, you know, he's hot as hell. The fans are all over him. And he's in this... Oh, fuck off. It's just terrible. It's not a very good match. La Resistance retained by a DQ.
He's the face, he's the poster boy for this as well.
Yes.
And he's back, what's yours, is referring to Edge, and he's in the opener, the curtain jerker, in a meaningless tag match, setting up a match which isn't even the main event, but is a match later on for the title. Like, what a way to use the poster boy to sell this pay-per-view. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Coming up next, it's Le Champion versus Le Who the Fuck Are You? Chris Jericho versus Tyson Tonko. Some people might remember Tyson Tonko. He was also Christian's bodyguard in TNA. Hooray. Excuse me for not caring. Lawler's in full cunt mode for this as well, because Trish is at ringside with Tonko. This is not very good. And it's got Chris Jericho in it. And that a lot of that has to do with the fact that Tyson Tonko isn't really a wrestler. He's just a guy that throws clubbing forearms.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I thought this was trash as well. I gave it 2 out of 5 just because Trish was at ringside and Chris Jericho is a god. But this is, again, like, is in a case in point, last match. Edge wrestling against 2 very green French Canadians who really shouldn't have even been tag team champions. This match, Chris Jericho, arguably your best worker, the Daniel Bryan of that generation, facing big guy with tattoos. And he beats him with an enziguri. And because of his height as well, he only enziguris him underneath the armpit.
Take that, shade pits.
Have some of that, right guard. Yeah. No, thank you. 2 out of 5. Another terrible match.
Yeah, I suppose it dispels the myth that we've currently got because, you know, we see Jericho sparingly in terms of being in matches because of how he's utilised by AEW and in New Japan and not being in the WWE machine anymore. That we kind of say, oh, Jericho, you know, he has a good match with everybody. Now, don't get me wrong, Jericho is one of the all-time greats. But there's not really anyone alive or dead who can have a great wrestling match with literally anyone put in front of them. You have to have something to work with. And Tyson Tonko was not something, it turns out. He was literally just someone for Trish to be a valet for, even though she's actually very much an active wrestler on the roster, as we'll find out very shortly, which made this, like, it was just really meaningless, completely pointless.
Yeah, utterly pointless. The next match is something that I thought, oh, hello, you piqued my interest. Randy Orton comes down. For some reason, he's off his rocker. This is obviously the point where Randy Orton had been a little bit of a problem backstage, shall we say that? Randy Orton's Intercontinental Champion. He's coming off that magnificent match a couple of months ago with Mick Foley. He's red hot, baby. So red hot, in fact, that he needs to tell everyone in Ohio what a real champion looks like. So he just comes out and just starts screaming at him for no apparent reason. And that just leads in nicely to an Intercontinental Championship match against Shelton Benjamin. Now, admittedly, this match isn't too bad, actually. It's arguably the best wrestling match of the night, which, but it felt slow, very slow. And this is where Randy Orton's legacy is divided, isn't it? Because we go from these mind-shattering moments, like the match with Mick Foley, to this. This is Randy Orton's MO. This is really his legacy. And his legacy is that he is a very smooth, very well-paced wrestler, but ultimately not very exciting. Doesn't really do anything that, you know, kind of shifts the paradigm, so to speak. And that's evident in a match with Shelton Benjamin, who, at the time, is a supreme athlete and certainly very high in the company's stock, proven in this match, despite the fact Randy Orton, surprise, goes over. He needs every tool at his disposal, to be fair, to knock off the Shelton Benjamin. So I'm kind of impressed by the way they booked this match, because Shelton Benjamin gets a lot of ring time, you know, consistently getting near falls. Ric Flair comes ambling down, utterly clueless as to what kind of proposition he's got himself into. It is a little bit overbooked at the end. It was a little bit messy. Ultimately, the content of the match is fine, but its pacing is so slow at times that there's a lot of gaps in there, and you're starting to see, you know, the birth or the evolution, should I say, pun intended, of Randy Orton's rest holds.
Yeah, and it was, I know that he was kind of playing a heel and predominantly has played a heel, but he doesn't really change it up. Like when he's playing a babyface, there's still a lot of rest holds in there. It's not suddenly more exciting from him, which is frustrating because, as you say, he's very smooth and very capable in the ring and actually has very good psychology, I think. But ultimately, he is fucking boring, and he's boring on the mic, and he's kind of boring in the ring. And he has good matches, providing he's in there with someone who's, really fast-paced and exciting, which Shelton Benjamin is. And as you say, I thought this was actually a good match and probably the best match of the night. It goes like 15 minutes as well. Like, it's a long match. It's one of the longer matches on the card. But it's just, it doesn't really, as you say, there's just a lot of lulls in the action that are too long. This could have done with being 10 minutes, really. But Shelton Benjamin has been kind of having this thing, hasn't he, with Evolution, where he beat Triple H a couple of times on Raw. He faced Ric Flair at the last pay-per-view and picked up the win, and has kind of narrowly been defeated by Randy Orton here. So he's definitely been given a platform by WWE to say, okay, let's see how hot you can get, because we're going to put you in there with some really good guys, put you in there in the mid-card, give you a title shot. I guess this was kind of the audition for Shelton Benjamin early on as to whether he was going to really start climbing the ranks. And ultimately, as we now know with hindsight, he never really did, despite being a brilliant athlete and a great wrestler. And it's because he's just got no charisma as a wrestler. We've covered it before. And yeah, this match is just two quite uncharismatic people who are good wrestlers having a slower match than was really needed. But when the action does pick up, it's good.
Yeah, ultimately, Shelton Benjamin's legacy is somewhat similar to Bobby Lashley's, except he, thankfully avoided some horrible fucking storylines later down the line. Looks $1 million, prime athlete, but when it comes to the entertainment aspect of wrestling, he is a little bit lacking. And, a lot of guys entertain through their wrestling and their athleticism. And that's the key thing. But they also have that. For instance, John Morrison is a very fine example of somebody who is an insane athlete, very talented. But he's also got wild charisma. Not necessarily that good on the mic, but when you look as good as he does, you don't really need to be. All you got to do is just basically go, look at me, I'm fucking gorgeous. And people are like, yeah, you arsehole. And that works beautifully. And that's why they paired him with somebody like The Miz, who could, elevate him mic-wise. For Shelton Benjamin, they stuck him with Charlie Haas for a while. Thanks a lot, lads.
Welcome to the big leagues.
Yeah, ultimately, it is a decent match, but it's not a barn burner, it's not a blockbuster, and I thought it was going to be a bit of a show stealer, and it wasn't. It was 3 out of 5. It was good, but it was very middle of the road in places, and, having Ric Flair come down like a crazy lunatic and falling all over the place doesn't really make it any better either. So, yeah, 3 out of 5. Decent enough, but messy in places as well. There are a couple of botches which look very evident. And, yeah, it should be match of the night, but ultimately it's a bit boring. Women's Fatal 4-Way match. This is a good one. Women's Championship. Now, obviously, in the lead-up to this, I think we're building up to the Kane Stalker angle with Lita, because Matt Hardy gets booted out of the arena just beforehand. Also, did you notice this slight faux pas? So when Matt Hardy's backstage with Lita, and they're just ferociously getting off, and then Bischoff bursts in with security, he goes, excuse me, this is a private locker room. And then, I'm pretty sure he says, this is a woman's locker room. Therefore pointing out that really he shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
Which just makes the whole thing dumb. But I like how Eric Bischoff's like, can I watch? It's just like standing in the corner.
I'm just going to sit in the corner.
With about 55 security. How many security guards do you need to remove Matt Hardy? It's not Kane. It's Matt Hardy, bruv. So yeah, Lita's got her big opportunity. Victoria is champion, and she's defending against Lita, Trish, and Gail Kim in a fatal 4-way. This is an interesting one because look at this. The talent involved in this match. This is 4 Hall of Famers, or soon to be Hall of Famers, or should be Hall of Famers, really. I mean, I know Gail Kim spent the majority of her time in TNA, but let's be honest, she is pretty much responsible for a resurgence in the way women's wrestling was perceived in the modern era through what she did in the Knockouts division with Taryn Terrell. And here we are, all 4 of these women in their youth or their prime, going after each other for the Women's Championship. Now, I thought this was quite reasonable, thought it was quite good, but again, like many women's matches of this era, it ultimately, it's good, but you know that there's more.
Yeah, no, that's completely right. And it's I mean, what is it? It's less than 5 minutes for a fatal 4-way match. Fatal 4-Way Championship match, less than 5 minutes. That gives everyone essentially a minute, a quarter each to go out there and get their shit in and look good. So it ends up being a really fast pace, which is great, and it's entertaining. It's an exciting match. And as you say, the talent there, they're also capable, but you're just left wanting more. You're left ultimately unsatisfied because you're thinking, well, hang on, actually, that was building to be something really good. Or if they could have been allowed to tell a story and build the match properly, rather than just everyone get your shit in early doors, it would actually had the potential to be a really, really good match. As you say, when you look at those four involved, we should be talking about this as one of the all-time great women's matches. And instead it was a good match, but it feels throwaway. And that should never be the case when you've got your title involved. But yeah, it was good. Trish wins. We've got a habit of watching Trish winning women's titles on this podcast. But yeah, she's sort of really firmly on the path to the stardom that she really acquires in terms of actually as an in-ring performer, but still doing it while being this valet for Tyson Tomko and, this kind of rumbling feud with Chris Jericho that she has. She's kind of involved in nonsense that she doesn't need to be in at this point in her career. It's just she's so good at the nonsense that they couldn't seem to replace her there. But yeah, it was a good match, and as you said, way too short. And, when you look at how long the main event goes, we'll talk about it in a bit, there was just no need. Like, you could have easily taken time off that to give to the women. But that's the story of Vince McMahon.
Yeah, this whole pay-per-view revolves around one man who wants more time than anybody else. One thing, again, that I did notice from watching this match is just how good Victoria was and how woefully underappreciated she is. I'm not sure if she's in the Hall of Fame or not. If she's not, she fucking well should be. It's as simple as that. But yeah, overall, it was a fun little match, and because it was short, it was nice and easy to get involved in, wasn't it? I think that's what I liked about it, was the fact that it was short. Actually, because I've given it 2.5 stars, but really it's a 3.5 in a lot of ways. It just needed a little bit more content to boost it up the card a bit. But like you say, it needed more time and it didn't get it. And ironically enough, because it was so short in comparison to everything else, it actually kind of flourished because of that, because it was a case of get your shit in, get it in quick, and get out. And yeah, the women did a very admirable job again. So much talent.
She's not in
there.
the Hall of Fame. Just had a quick check. No, she's not in the Hall of Fame. And she was actually the PWI Woman of the Year for 2004 as well. So that kind of shows what a year she was having.
Yeah, exactly. She had a great match with Molly Holly at WrestleMania. She has really flourished over this year. This was definitely the year of Victoria, and I think that she belongs in the Hall of Fame, to be honest. I know it's a fake Hall of Fame, so to speak, and all that nonsense, but still. Johnathan Coachman versus Eugene. You got anything to say about this match? Because last couple of shows, I've made it very clear that Eugene and the gimmick as a whole can go fuck itself in the hardest fashion possible. And I'm not going to cover this match. This match was trash, and I don't give a shit.
This match was 7.5 minutes long. Eugene versus Johnathan Coachman got an extra couple of minutes to the women's title in a fatal 4-way featuring Lita, Trish Stratus, Gail Kim, and Victoria. That is fucking disgusting. That's pretty much the only thing you need to say. Like, we trashed the fact they were trying to make Johnathan Coachman seem like, a legitimate good wrestler because he'd done like a month of training when he beat Tadges a couple of shows ago. And now we've got him in there with the fucking awful Eugene angle, and it's just the whole thing is horrible, and they worked so hard to get this over, and it was, a piss break match is fine, but when it's like 7.5 minutes long, like that's a shit break, never mind a piss break. It's just ridiculous. Hated everything about it. Move on.
Yeah, I wish I'd had the understanding of mental health back then to really, really give this the shit it deserved. And I wish society did as a whole, because actually even then mental health wasn't quite on the spectrum, was it? But it is now, and disabilities weren't as understood as they are now. And I think if you tried this in this day and age, boy, you would have fucking got something for it. But but it is what it is. Yeah, like you say, fucking move on. And move on we shall to the World Heavyweight Championship. We mentioned Kane and Chris Benoit before. Here we are, Kane and Chris Benoit, the penultimate match of the show. Because as long as the game's around, nobody's in the main event but me. It's hysterical.
Do you like that world title there, Chris? Do you like it? Do you think that means you're going to be in the main event, Chris? Fuck you, Chris.
There's obviously a bitterness here of, Chris Benoit's champion. Oh, that's fine. Oh, I want every main event and I want it now. It's just so irritating. I understand why it's the main event, but fuck off, man. World Heavyweight Championship. Ultimately, though, when you look back at it, people will probably say that was the right decision. Kane versus Chris Benoit. Cool, this went on a while. I love Kane, and I saw flashes of why I love Kane in this match, but like you say, not even the greatest wrestlers in the world are going to have world-class matches every single time, despite how good they are at carrying matches. And again, this was a match, right, where Kane is very charismatic, but it's a subtle kind of charisma, isn't it? It's a horror charisma. And he's up against Mr. fucking charisma himself, Chris Benoit. You know, the vacuum. And I will give him credit. He looks a little bit more keen to talk because he's champion. But ultimately, it's still the same shtick, isn't it? You see in the promo, I've overcome so much. Nobody believed I could beat anybody, and I'm the rabid Wolverine. And I think he had a new catchphrase as well.
Oh, he used it about 4 times as well. It was just...
What was his, I can't remember what it was. It was bloody atrocious. He's prove me wrong or something. That was a fucking terrible.
It was, yeah. It was just like, it was just nonsense.
Yeah, it was the idea that, it was just like hammering home the fact that, holy shit, Chris Benoit is champion. It's like, yes, we know, we do watch the product. Like, for better or for worse, mate, you are a champion. And ultimately, this whole title run revolves around just that one moment at WrestleMania. Without it, so far, I've got to say, not overly impressed with this title run. Not because the wrestling's been bad at all. No, this was another serviceable matchup, but he's just so fucking boring. And he won the title really simply because he was a great worker, and it felt like at the time it was a very deserving moment. And ultimately, if you're talking about giving the belt to somebody based on hard work, then yeah, Chris Benoit should have been champion. But do you know what? People have this revisionist history that he's the greatest technical wrestler of all time. I think he's probably just as smooth as people like Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, but he's dwarfed by their ability to be so much more charismatic and to tell such better stories. Chris Benoit is just a great mechanic. That's all he is. Do you know what Chris Benoit should have been? He should have been the fucking head trainer for WWE instead of that fucking, what's his name? Huge Erection, Hugh Morris. Chris Benoit would have been perfect as a lead head trainer in this company because nobody knows how to wrestle as well as he does. But when it comes to charisma and things like that, there's hundreds of guys who are better than him. Hundreds. And that's where the massive gaping chasm comes from. And ultimately, of course we were going to remember him more for what he did as opposed to what he should have been. And yeah, I kind of dispensed with this match early doors. It felt a little bit sluggish. It felt a bit slow. It became very brawly. And of course, Chris Benoit's not a brawler. He doesn't throw punches and forearms. Chris Benoit he's a technical masterpiece. And going up against Kane, ultimately, that was a big failure because Kane's not going to go out there and start doing fucking hammerlocks and the like, is he? He's Kane, for fuck's sake. He's 7 foot tall. And yeah, the dynamic didn't really work, nor did the match as well as I would have liked, at least.
Yeah, it's one of those where you've got 2 guys who are both really, really good, but just the chemistry isn't quite there. As you say, I thought it was a fine match. They're 2 individually talented for it to not be fine. It did go over long. There was no need for, I think it was sort of 15, 16, 17, 18 minutes, somewhere around that mark, just under 20 anyway. But it was a long match it wasn't that exciting. A lot of the story was, Kane was too strong to be put in the crossface, and that was kind of the story of the match. Benoit trying to find a way to kind of be resilient and get his finisher in. And yeah, it was an okay story, but it wasn't the most exciting in the world, and it never really had me on kind of tenterhooks to see what was going to happen. It's one of those where I never felt that Benoit's title reign was in jeopardy, even though obviously, Kane is a monster and all the rest of it. Samoa Joe in the modern WWE is a bit like how Kane was booked for huge amounts of his career. Built as a monster, but whenever it comes to actually a big match where he has an opportunity to win a title or to beat someone massive, he's going to lose and put the other guy over and give the other guy a rub. And it's weird that he's got the ability to give a rub, considering he doesn't really win anything of note. Obviously, he had a couple of title reigns that were all, pretty middle of the road and inconsequential. Obviously, his first one being 1 day in length. His only actual kind of WWE title run of his career, which is ridiculous to think of. So yeah, I never felt that it was watching it that it was ever going to be anything other than a Benoit win. And they never managed to kind of make me believe during the course of the match, even when Kane's being physically dominating, that it's going to be anything other than Benoit finding a way to overcome the giant. It was okay. It was fine. It just never really had me emotionally invested, to be honest.
Yeah, 2.5 out of 5, to be honest.
Yeah, middle of the road.
Yeah, feels like a short card, and that's because the main event is here for nothing. Literally nothing other than Eco. Shawn Michaels versus Triple H. Again, it has been 28 days. In a Hell in a Cell match. This is the kind of match where, if you're a massive fan of just sports entertainment, you probably think this is 5 stars. AKA Nick Payne. He's probably sitting there thinking this is 5 stars.
Fap alert.
Yeah, tell me about it. This is, well, there's no sugarcoating this. It's fucking long, ladies and gentlemen. It's really long. If you're going to go back and watch this, prepare yourself. This match is 47 minutes long. Now, Triple H is regarded as a good worker, solid worker, but he's methodical, isn't he? He's a paced worker. 47 minutes of that. That's what you're getting. Do you know what? Yeah, we're looking at this from a very smarky perspective, and we're fans. But ultimately, there's a reason why people had such a shitty on about Triple H during this period, and this is another reason why, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that Triple H wanted to overshadow everybody else on this card. He wanted to show up. He wanted to show off, and he wanted to do it with his best mate. He wanted to make sure his best mate and him were in the main event. So he's like, yeah, put us inside Hell in a Cell. Oh, it'd be amazing. It'll be the end of our incredible rivalry. But fuck everybody else. It was so obvious. It's so obvious. This match, right, when they start, basically, at the end of the Chris Benoit match to the end of this show, which is just this match left, there's about an hour and 10. It's insane. It's an insane amount of time. He's like, yeah, I'm the gamer, and I want at least a third of the pay-per-view. It's like, why? Why do you need this much time? And also, one thing I always hear in wrestling is less is more. Less is more, whether it's training or watching, whatever. Less is more, lads. Less is bloody more. 47 minutes long. It's not bad, Hell in a Cell. I admire the fact that they stayed inside the Hell in a Cell. That was nice. They used the cell as much as possible. This is regarded as one of the best Hell in a Cell matches of all time. I vehemently disagree. I have seen multiple matches that were infinitely better than this. This was slow. It was sluggish. Shawn Michaels is, for my money, the greatest all-round wrestler and performer in history. And this is boring. That says a lot. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that Triple H was a great worker. He was a wonderful character and an amazing, just an amazing booker, so to speak, and creator and storyteller. But ultimately, the reason he's not regarded as a Stone Cold or a Rock or even The Undertaker or John Cena is because this kind of match he doesn't have the ability, I've noticed, to step it up another notch and be a 5-star wrestler. You know, I very rarely remember thinking that Triple H would completely steal the show. He would never have a match of the year for me. Very, very rarely. He's had the odd real gem, but if you said to me, Undertaker, I can reel off a list of 20, 30 world-class matches, with Shawn Michaels alone. Same with The Rock and same with all these guys. But Triple H, I just sit there and I think, when did Triple H really have... I mean, I would argue Cactus Jack might be his greatest ever match.
Yeah.
I thought this was tedious. I thought it was very drawn out, a surprise. And ultimately, Triple H goes over as well. Of course he fucking does, because he's the game. But it serves no purpose, really. I know that they're supposed to have had this blood rivalry, but it's been going on for like 2 years now. And I imagine, as a fan, it must have been bloody exhausting once again revisiting this. They had to be a part of the Chris Benoit title run, which was embarrassing. It was like, oh, we've both got to be involved in that. So both of those high-profile title matches that we saw with Chris Benoit involved them. And then we have them here, completely overshadowing Chris Benoit again. It seems to me like they use this by design to essentially piss all over everybody else on the card. And it felt disingenuous. It was very, very long. It had a lot of decent content for a Hell in a Cell match, but the problem was, because of the length, you waited too long. It was like waiting 5 minutes for every spot. So I've been reasonable and I've given it 2.5 out of 5. But for me, this is a very long and boring Hell in a Cell match, and I don't think it belongs in history as one of the better ones.
Yeah, it is too long. And this is what we were saying kind of critically about Randy Orton. You can say exactly the same about Triple H. Like, they are cut from the same cloth. Randy Orton has modelled his in-ring style and much of his career, really, on Triple H's in-ring style and career. A real slow pace to his matches, as you said, methodical. And they always build that up for both guys, and particularly for Triple H. They built that as being part of his character and part of his mystique. The cerebral assassin is designed around the fact that he would just take his time to dismantle you, and that's fine. And Shawn Michaels obviously can then, pick up the pace. It's just the fact that you've seen these guys so many times in quite a short spell as well, over the last, for the whole of this year, really. You've seen them pretty much at every single pay-per-view, certainly every Raw pay-per-view. You've seen these guys going at it. They're going at it, taking shots at each other and promos and segments every week on Raw as well, on TV. So you just feel a little bit saturated. And by the time you've got to this point, and then it lasts 3/4 of an hour plus of, blood-drenched fucking violence, which really wasn't that different from the fact they had a last man standing match a couple of pay-per-views ago, or back at the start of the year, Royal Rumble time. Like, this has just gone on and on and on unnecessarily. I'm all for long rivalries, but you should be able to, if you want to tell that story, don't tell a 2-year story in the space of 6 months. You've got to space it out a little bit, have them go away onto other things, and then inevitably get drawn back together. That's how you tell a long-term story. And this, I don't know, as you say, it just felt like I'm bored of seeing these two now, which is ridiculous considering their talent levels and their standing, but I just feel saturated by it. It was a fine Hell in a Cell match. It was good, but it was just way too long. It could have done with being half hour and sprinkle the rest of that time across the rest of the card, particularly for the women's match, because it was just way too long. As you say, the pay-per-view goes on for over 2.5 hours, and 1 hour and 10 of that is taken up with this rivalry, the build, this match, the entrances, and you just don't need it. You just don't need it. That's probably a 3-star match for me, but you're at a point now where you're saying, I literally never want to see these two wrestle again. Like, I don't want to see them interact with each other again. I don't want to see them in each other's fucking presence again, because you know, if I turn on NXT and they have like a picture of them two backstage hugging, I'm going to vomit on myself because I've just been seeing far too much of these two covering 2004. But yeah, it was a fine match. I understand why it was the main event. It's your main blood feud in the company. I get that. But yeah, just, it doesn't need to be this long. I don't need 45 minutes plus to tell this story inside the cell. Like, just, yeah, stop it. But yeah, it was fine. Too long. Fucking move on. Move on from each other.
Yeah. I mean, as we move on from Bad Blood as a whole, I'm looking at the times for this show, and I think it was really indicative of the fact the main event was 47 minutes, 26 seconds long. And then in the undercard, you have Eugene versus Johnathan Coachman. That's 7 minutes, 37 long. Now, admittedly, that's way too long. But then, you know, like you say, women's match, 4 minutes, 43. Chris Jericho and Tyson Tonka was 5 minutes, 57. I mean, Batista and Maven was 3 minutes, 44. I mean, it should be, but that's how it is. And then they sort of tried to cover this by making the title matches a bit longer. So Randy Orton's Intercontinental title match for 15 minutes. You know, Benoit and Edge versus La Resistance, despite a DQ finish, was 10 minutes long. And of course, Benoit later wrestles for 17 minutes against Kane for the World Heavyweight Championship. It's a case of give people better structure, better pacing. This card had some really special talent on it. You know, look at all these names: Shawn Michaels, Kane, Chris Benoit, Edge, Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin, Chris Jericho. And ultimately, none of them were put in the correct place. And that's why I think this pay-per-view was so bad, and probably the worst I've seen of 2004 so far. Simply because it was just so... And I thought this was going to be quite good as well. I honestly thought, this could be quite special. Admittedly, I didn't look at the card beforehand. Now looking at the card, it's woefully understacked. You know, for that level of talent. Like you say, someone like Edge, for instance, he should have been doing so much more than this. You know, he just beat Kane in his comeback match. He's obviously being hyped up as the next big thing again. He's this, you know, ridiculously good-looking, charismatic guy who ultimately will go on to be the rated R superstar, but we're going to have to wait a while for that. And, yeah, I mean, I just found this thoroughly deflating to watch as a show. I'm grateful it wasn't, you know, a 4 or 5 hour spectacular like it can be nowadays, but there's so much stuff here made me just want to you know, it took me so long to watch this because I just had to keep pausing it. Oh, I'll go and make a cup of coffee. Oh, I'll play GTA for a bit. Oh, you know, I'll fucking fill out more job applications or whatever. Because I just thought, Jesus Christ, man. They just get to the damn point. And that's really how I sum up Bad Blood. Get to the fucking point. And they never do. It takes them an age. What this was akin to sitting down with your sweet old relatives who are kind of lost their marbles and they're sat in front of BBC News with the volume up to maximum because they're basically deaf at this age, and you're trying to have a conversation with them and explain to them why why mum hasn't been able to, you know, cook dinner the way she normally does, and it felt like you were having this 3-hour conversation about literally nothing with an old person. That's how it felt watching this pay-per-view. That's how it felt to me. And ultimately, this is a 1-star pay-per-view because of that. I don't think it's worth revisiting. I don't think it's worth really watching again. There's nothing here. At least in all the pay-per-views we've watched where it's been pretty bad, you can at least say, we've got to watch this. Got to watch this match. Even WrestleMania, which we thought was pretty turgid and long, that had Eddie Guerrero in it. You know, it had Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle. You couldn't miss that. You couldn't miss the return of The Undertaker. There's nothing really here. Nothing. You know, the one match that really I should be recommending to you is the Hell in a Cell, but it's 47 minutes long. And in this day and age, who's going to sit down for an hour to watch a match from the past that's not that good? You know, if you're going to watch a match that's an hour long, probably best to go and watch Triple H versus Rock, the Iron Man match, if you want to see something really great in terms of storytelling. Yeah, this was disappointing, man. A disappointing John. And hopefully 2004 will pick up again. And I know at least later down the line we've got some stuff, but I'm pretty sure next up is the Great American Bash. And if I remember rightly, That was arguably one of the worst pay-per-views in the history of wrestling. So expect more rage, is all I can say. Anything to add, mate, before we wrap it up?
I was just going to say about the timings on Hell in a Cell. I was at 47 minutes for this one. Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, the first ever Hell in a Cell, was just under half an hour. Mankind versus Undertaker was under 20 minutes. I think that was about 17 minutes. And the Cactus Jack Triple H Hell in a Cell was 23 minutes. This was 47. Those are like, they're the first three Hell in a Cell matches, and they are three of the best. For some people, they'll be the three best Hell in a Cell matches. Certainly out of those will be two of the three. And not like only one of them, which is the worst of those three, is 24 minutes. One is under half an hour, which is the first ever Undertaker Shawn Michaels. And obviously, I can forgive Mankind for going less than 20 minutes, considering what he went through, because that probably felt like about 4 days of matches in there. But to have a great Hell in a Cell match, which essentially is in there to be a spot fest anyway, you don't need to go for fucking 45 minutes. So that was the only point, just the difference in time from some of those early and classic Hell in a Cell matches. Actually, you don't need to go overly long to make your point, particularly when it's supposed to be an excellence in violence. It was just a pay-per-view, as you say. It really did drag. It was hard work, this pay-per-view, and it's not going to get better anytime soon with Great American Bash on the horizon. And I know we've got Taboo Tuesday coming later in the year, which is another absolute stinker. So, yeah, something to look forward to there. Tune in, wrestling fans.
All right. Yeah, I know. We're not exactly selling it. Yeah, tune in to listen to us tell you how shit it was. Stick with us. I know quite a few of you are checking these out. Quite a lot of people, I've noticed, are downloading them, listening to them, not interacting, which is understandable because it's very difficult, obviously, not knowing our recording regime and stuff and things like this. But if you do have any opinions, feel free to send them in, and we will try and cover them at the end. We are still recording them as we speak. The date is January the 13th. So, fuck it, that gives you an indication as to, this is actually being recorded on the day it's being released. So that makes a change, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, if you do have any opinions on 2004 as a whole, memories of what it was like watching Chris Benoit or Randy Orton or Triple H, and maybe you remember this fucking godforsaken match and want to have your say, feel free to send it in, and we will definitely cover it at some point. But thank you for listening nonetheless. Thank you for sticking with us, because when you're going back over history, wow, I'll tell you what, revisionist history really does give you an opportunity to realise that not all of it was nearly as good as you think it was. And this was, for a lot of people, a better year for WWE before they started having some pretty shitty times. And ultimately, so far, it's been a real mixed bag. But we soldier on. There's plenty more to get our teeth into. And our next stop, of course, will be the Great American Bash. From myself, and from Steve Neal, thank you very much for listening to Manic Mondays. Remember, every Monday, we do try and ensure that we bring a Manic Mondays. Some weeks, obviously, we don't because of pay-per-views and stuff. It was obviously a very heavy weekend this week, which is why we've tried to keep this one quite short, because we've got coverage of NXT UK TakeOver. We've also got coverage, of course, from Hard to Kill as well, which we'll be covering this week as well. So look out for that as well, as we talk about the monumental moments involved in that show. All in all, a very, very, very heavy week. So hopefully you've enjoyed this streamlined version of Manic Mondays. And as I said, from myself, and from Steve Neal, thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you very soon for more nonsense for the year of 2004.